Today's video is sponsored by Roll for Combat and their Battle Zoo Bestiary for D&D 5e and Pathfinder Kickstarter, live now. Tired of killing skeletons, goblins, and those poor kobolds that seem to be endlessly massacred? Battle Zoo Bestiary adds 114 new monsters for you to slay. The best part? Or should I say parts? The Monster Parts System. This brand new system allows you to create and upgrade all your gear with monster parts. Craft custom gear like weapons, armor, shields that you can level up as you level up. I love this system. I've always wanted a great D&D system for this. My next campaign will be only hunting and crafting. But as excited as I am for monster hunting, Battle Zoo Bestiary also introduces a new subclass, Monster Mage, that has the ability to steal abilities from monsters. Hunt monsters for spells and gear? And to top it off, the Kickstarter is coming in big with 3 books, a Dragon Ancestry book, and an adventure for level 1 to 10. Kickstarter ends October 1st. Head over to battlezoo.com and don't miss out. And now what you're here for.
How I drove my players to madness by the 5th session of my campaign. Hi everyone, All Things D&D is back with another story. This story was submitted by our fan Main's Man Banjo. And just like his name implies, he plays his party like a banjo. Listen to this gripping psychological story and tell us about how you almost made your party go insane. Here's some context before I begin the story. I'm a new DM who's come a long way since October of 2019. I was running a shoddy campaign before this current one, and we decided to scrap it and move on after some conflicts with the plot and the general disinterest in what I had created. The campaign did a lot of things wrong, as I created it before I knew how to calculate a save DC, and the story was a bit cheesy and hard to take seriously. So after we decided to scrap it, I brandished my new storytelling skills and wrote an entire homebrew world from the ground up, and my players loved it. They spent the better part of 3 to 4 weeks working on their characters as I finished polishing up what I had prepared for Session 0. However, while I was doing this, I warned my friends that this campaign was going to be very dark and heavy, which only poured gasoline on their excitement. We started the campaign with a 7-foot-tall mark of making human artificer, artillerist, who served in a few wars as a field engineer and enjoys telling dad jokes. A variant human barbarian zealot who lived his whole life in the deep forest of a newly discovered jungle continent with dinosaurs and massive beasts. A rock gnome rogue thief who left the pirate life after she lost a loved one. An eccentric artificer alchemist who's a well-established doctor in her country, despite the rampant sexism. A lovely kobold circle of the land druid with a very nasally voice who just loves fishing. And a warforged aberrant mind sorcerer, whose soul was likely illegally man-made. Session 0 begins with my players surviving an airship crash after pirates shot it down. The players wake up to the screams of the passengers being eaten by ghouls and undead. They were in the permacold, a cold, desolate place with cursed snow and perpetual sub-zero temperatures. On top of this, it's been expanding for decades, slowly taking cities and countries with it. They would later figure out that anything that died on the snow of the permacold would be later reanimated into a crude undead version of its living counterpart. But I digress. After fighting through the snow and running from a horde of 30-plus ghouls, they managed to secure themselves within an old capital city of a forgotten country. As they turned around, they looked around the city and noticed that despite the horrid conditions, people have managed to live within this city for years. They conclude the session within the tavern where we would start Session 1 at. Their excitement for the campaign was abundant, but they still had no idea what I had planned for them. To quickly summarize the context of 4 sessions, they learned that the town they were in was an old capital city of the country that was overtaken by the ever-expanding snow of the permacold. The town has been experiencing kidnappings for the past 2.5 years, and after some harassment from the sleazy guards, the players realized that it was up to them to fix the problem. They met with the town tinkerer Deaden, and after some medical emergencies, loose nails, and awkward small talk, Deaden notified the party he had seen the kidnapper walking along the train tracks of the outer city after he had been shot in the shoulder by him. He told the party that there's an abandoned train yard a few miles up the track that no one's been to in decades. He said if anyone was going to hide 13 people, it would be there. Also requesting that they bring back essential train parts. Deaden is the town tinkerer, and he's been working on the train for almost his entire life. The party arrives at the train yard, and after an eerie, non-violent excursion through the building, they find a basement with repeating photo phones playing a lovely song that juxtaposes the current mood. They find the notes of a mad scientist who seems to be running experiments so naturally, the group hands them to the alchemist, and as she interprets the notes, silently, she immediately gags at what she's reading. They eventually kill the mad scientist and bring back the experiment victims. The party is celebrated as heroes in the town. However, after an alcoholic relapse and light PTSD, they just want to fix the train and get the hell out of the town. Session 5 starts right when they repair the train and set off. And now, for the story. There was a surreal quiet within the train car. The party was feasting on the open bar that the tavern keeps so graciously provided. Though the excitement of the party was there, it was nullified by the horrors they witnessed in the cruxes of the permacold. It was quiet, and the party was silent for most of the train ride, feeling a bittersweet sense of relief. But the ambrosia of optimism was never an option within the permacold. The train screeched to a halt as the conductor deadened stepped from the engine room into the passenger cart that the party was cooped up in. "We have a problem," he said, as the party's heart rate began to accelerate. "I've been in the permacold for quite a long time, and if one thing is certain, this land likes to play tricks on the eye. However, I don't think that what's happening right now can be written off as an effect of my eyes playing tricks on me." The party grew restless as the artillerist looked down at Deaden and asked, "Give me a straightforward answer." Deaden responds with, "Well, to keep things short, I've passed by the same fallen tree for the last 5 minutes." These words send the party into a small panic before the sorcerer stepped forward, stating that this was just some petty illusion magic, as he left the train to figure out the problem. Everyone followed him out of the train to watch him dispel it. They only really began to panic when they realized what had been happening was not magical. Naturally, the barbarian began to sprint in a straight line ahead of the party to find the source, and to everyone's dismay, he ended up behind the party just 30 seconds later. In a panic, the spellcasters began burning spells, trying to find the source of this problem to no avail. During this time, they told the barbarian to keep running, and as he split away once more, the landscape of the permacold changed to a deciduous rainforest reminiscent of the barbarian's homeland and the artillerist station during the war. As the party watched in confusion as the land changed, everyone felt a horrible ringing sensation in their ears as their minds were beginning to be challenged by what other entity was present within the forest. At first, nothing noticeable was happening. Everyone seemed equally confused, but the artillerist was being fidgety. The druid eventually commented on the artillerist's behavior, and the artillerist responded with, "You don't see the beast?" as he grew more and more annoyed that his hallucination would always stalk him from the corner of his eye. The party grew uneasy, asking him what he was seeing. "Something from the war. It's here." There was a deafening moment of silence, until the party then realized that the barbarian had gone into the forest. I moved the barbarian into a separate voice channel and explained to him that his mother and father were traveling through the forest looking lost and confused. He gave chase after them, as they managed to stay unaware of his presence and out of his vision until he heard the voices of his parents all around him as he entered a small open patch of land within the forest. 6 wolves began to come out of the forest hungry and snarling, reminding the barbarian of his tribe's fate many years ago. After some combat and the barbarian being reduced to 15 hit points before his turn, he ran further into the forest screaming, knowing that he would join his tribe at the mouth of the same beasts. The party heard this screaming and began running after him, finding him out of breath. The party immediately went to heal him, but he was perfectly healthy. The real pain of the wolf still festers on his skin, but his body remains unharmed. Though the barbarian, still wild in his eyes, still sees his parents, this time waving him to follow them. After some confusion from the party, they immediately bolt after him. The barbarian continues cutting through the trees, yelling for his parents, and as he finds himself a similar outcrop to before. His parents look scared and lost as he runs to them and grabs them. He watches as they fade into sand in his fingertips, and as he opens his eyes, he sees his old tribe as dozens of villagers are running past him to the forest line to protect the village from incoming dire wolves. The party finds him moments later staring at the sky yelling, "There's too many! Stop!" The druid masterfully throws a net at the barbarian, taking him to the ground, as the sorcerer casts calm emotions on him to ease his sorrow. "Are you okay?" the druid asked. "What did you see?" said the sorcerer. "I saw wolves. I hate wolves." While this is happening, the druid looks at the artillerist and the barbarian and asks, "What's your greatest fear?" However, the party was too anxious to continue the line of questioning, and quickly took refuge within the train. As they go back, the sorcerer begins shouting words in deep speech into the forest. However, this gives little signs. The unaffected people are trying to get everyone to a sane state of mind, as they all begin to grow irritable with each other and break out into an argument. The party continues to bicker, This was common among the party, as they just met each other, and all 6 members are at opposite spectrums of personality. Eventually, their guide Deaden brings his hand down to the table and yells for everyone to be quiet. Much to my chagrin, this actually worked, and Deaden then explained what he thought was happening. The permacold has been isolated from the outside world for years, but despite this, we still have a history of the forgotten country our city used to be the capital of. There's an old tale described by the old natives of our country, depicting the god of madness, Kasanks. Every 12 years he would gain the power to access his avatar in the mortal plane, for one night, despite his imprisonment in Mechanus. During this time, he would create creatures of madness and torment, one of these creatures being the Kiok. The Kiok doesn't kill people, it feasts on their delirium, as it slowly drives them to madness and suicide. I found this story within the abandoned libraries of my city, and just wrote it off as a story to scare children. But I'm afraid not. The party stays silent for a second before they unanimously agree that though this is superstitious, it should remain on the table. They all decide to quietly wait within the train until whatever is happening blows over. The next psychic wave blows over the party's brains, this time affecting the barbarian again, the alchemist, and the rogue. The barbarian, still paranoid and restless, hearing the voices of his parents, now knows that the sorcerer wants to kill him. He wants to invade his mind and destroy everything. As he begins to brandish his glaive, the alchemist seems unaware of the psychic wave going on. In her silent boredom, she mentally goes through her notes thinking of all of her recipes, and she now can clearly see that the medicine she's been making for people for years has been poisoning people. In her incompetence, she somehow managed to create a pill that spreads the same plague that killed her mother, and for the second time she relapses and begins drinking and verbally degrading the party. While everyone's trying to figure out what's going on, the rogue retreats into her mind momentarily. She hears the voice of the woman she once loved years ago. She hears her running through the forest as adversaries catch up to her and mercilessly beat her to death. It sounds so real she turns around to see nothing. The sounds play on a loop as the screams always remain behind her, never being seen. Currently, the only non-affected individuals are the sorcerer and the druid. The druid, happy that he was correct in his assumption, announces to the group, "Everyone sit down in the center of the train. We can sing sea shanties to make you feel better." The sorcerer, doing his best to make sure that the druid doesn't continue his therapy work, proceeds to tell the hallucinating rogue over and over again that the woman she loved is truly dead via telepathy, as he repeatedly cast prestidigitation to quench the fire of the alchemist, who is trying to burn her notes. Needless to say, the party's chances of survival were slim. In the ensuing anarchy, the party's guide grows restless as he's about to go out of the train alone to make the voices he's hearing stop. The sorcerer eventually convinces him that he should just start up the train again to see if they can continue moving, and as Deaden closes the door, the sorcerer hears singing outside of the train, and being that he's been the calmest of the group, he recognizes it as real. However, fighting alongside mentally unstable party members because of a hunch is not in his best interest, so he decides to keep it to himself. A few minutes pass by, and the alchemist continues to verbally harass everyone that comes in her proximity. As the artillerist walks by, she says, "You're a deadbeat father who would rather fight a war than be with his family." The artillerist promptly looks at her, nearly too intoxicated to move, and just laughs. The rogue eventually heads over to the bar looking for booze, still in tears as she still hears the screams. The alchemist blurts, "You're a no-good pirate. You let your friend die because you were too selfish and idiotic to find a better profession." Under any other circumstances, this would light the rogue ablaze. But in silent sorrow, she walks back to her corner of the train in a drunken sadness. At this point, the session began taking a darker turn. I don't want to make any assumptions, but if the party didn't stop the rogue, she would have likely leaped from the moving train. The morale of the party was crushed, as everyone sat in a state of delirium as the druid sang sea shanties, and the sorcerer continued his emotionless therapy sessions. However, the creature wasn't done with its games. Another wave of madness washed over the group, affecting everyone beside the druid. The druid watches all of his party mates delve into insanity, as the sorcerer, who previously was level-headed, descended into a state of severe paranoia. He believed that the people who had built him had put him into a simulation to test his abilities. In this simulation, the proctors were present, and he came to a realization that his proctors were all the party mates. As he came to this realization, an overwhelming sense of disappointment emanated from each party member, as he felt that after the test, he was going to be scrapped like rusty farm equipment. The barbarian looked to his left and saw an unfamiliar woman who claimed to be one of the newborn test children of the mad scientist they killed earlier. She told him that she was happy and she just needed time to grow, but the party killed her out of selfishness because they thought she was a monster. The artillerist begins to hear his abusive father, who he put in jail many years ago. He can hear the sounds of him breaking out of prison and killing his family out of revenge for putting him in jail. The rogue hears the same voices, only now she can see what's happening. And the alchemist can hear her dead mother singing her a bedtime story. While this is happening, and the party's on the verge of killing each other, their guide Deaden, who has no combat experience and has also been affected by the wave, stops the train and announces he's going to kill it, with or without the party, and is quickly stopped by the threat of being knocked out by the 7-foot-tall artillerist. The artillerist looks at the rest of the party and says, "I'm going outside, with or without you. Whether or not I stay in here or die out there, if another one of these waves hits me, I'm likely going to kill all of you and then myself. I'm not going to die like this." There's a pause within the group as the sorcerer stands up mumbling to himself, staring daggers at his creators. He says, "If I'm going to be scrapped, I may as well do it in style." The barbarian volunteers as well, as he keeps his eyes glued to the sorcerer, and the druid who's humming to himself happily brandishes his trusty fishing net and follows the artillerist. The group of 4 begins searching, and after a natural 20 on the investigation, they find what they were looking for. An infinitely black, shimmering humanoid being with white eyes and teeth rests atop a treetop singing and humming loudly. As the party approaches it, it stops and stares down at the party as it's aware of their presence, and it knows that they are aware of its presence. A fight breaks out, and the barbarian immediately goes down, as he's hit with a madness bolt that paralyzes him. The chances of killing this creature grew slimmer and slimmer, as it was a CR4 creature fighting 3 level 3 party members. But after a couple of good rolls from the artillerist and a lucky roll from the druid throwing a fishing net, they managed to lock it down, as it cackled in the joy of its death. The sorcerer telepathically links to the creature and begins to bargain with it, saying that they can arrange something to make it stop what's happening. The creature that's indifferent to its own death just smiles and responds, "No, I've had plenty of entertainment from you 8. Insinuating that there's an extra party member among the group. The sorcerer responds confused, "What do you mean 8? To which the creature responds, this time in deep, "Your friend." The party eventually kills it, negating all the hallucinations, urges, and artificial landmass, bringing them back into the frigid cold of the permacold. However, the sorcerer does not feel the link end and continues to talk to the creature. "What are you?" asks the sorcerer. "Like you, I was built for a purpose by my creator. However, unlike you, I'm actually good at it," the creature says sarcastically. The sorcerer, intrigued, responds with, "Oh, I like you. I hope to see you in the future." The creature doesn't respond, however. Being that they are telepathically communicating, the sorcerer knows it's mutual. The link ends. This was a wild session that ended with them finally leaving the permacold. My players were stunned at the session, saying it was the best one I've ever run, and that they were thoroughly terrified. However, they made me promise that the next few sessions were going to be more lighthearted, because this was extremely taxing. Well, I think that's easily on par, if not better, than a false Hydra. I love when DMs use a character's backstory against them like this. Bravo! Please let us know what you think and comment below. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, All Things D&D. Our videos are posted every Tuesday and Friday, so stay tuned for more amazing Dungeons & Dragons content.